Hey y'all, it's Angela, welcome back. So out of all the genres that get a lot of love on BookTube, there is one genre that I feel like is my personal favorite that doesn't really, get a lot of kind of dedicated videos to, and that is speculative fiction. And I think the reason being, speculative fiction is such a broad genre, it's really hard to kind of put characteristics to it. To me, what it really is it's fiction set in very much like a real world or a slightly altered real world setting with kind of light sci-fi, fantasy, apocalyptic, dystopian elements. And the main focus is on the people and the effects of this kind of new world on the people rather than a huge plot or a exploration into the specifics of this new world. I like that speculative fiction is this amoeba-like genre that can take the form of other genres like literary fiction and romance, and it just makes it extra interesting to kind of read. So here are some of my recs and books I think you should check out. The first book is This Is How You Lose a Time More by Amal El-Mutar and Max Gladstone. This is a more sci-fi leaning book, and it follows our two agents, Red and Blue, who are on opposing teams in this time war. And they basically travel through different timelines, change things so that it results in a more favorable outcome for their side. They end up starting this letter correspondence after winning battles, first as a way to gloat about their respective victories, but then their conversations kind of develop and it turns their relationship into something more. This book is really intimidating to start and get into, but I think it's probably one of the most beautifully written books that I've read recently. It's got such a wonderfully kind of layered prose with a lot of different metaphors and really beautiful descriptions of this very complex system of time. These two agents come from really different worlds and upbringings, and you get a sneak peek of each of those through their letters. And I think the way they communicate is just so beautiful. It's one of those books where you feel like you're being romanced by the actual book itself. I like that it's a sapphic sci-fi, and the structure is kind of set up in these anecdotal battles, and there is an overarching plot, but really you see blips in time of how Agents Red and Blue develop this really beautiful and kind of larger than life relationship. The next book is One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. This is a YA new adult book, and it follows our main character August, who recently moved to New York City, basically to kind of get lost in the city, get away from her mother and her mother's like decades-long hobby, and she's really just trying to live a quiet, plain life. One day she meets this girl on the subway named Jane. She's instantly enamored, but she realizes as she talks to Jane that this girl isn't exactly of this time and space. This book is also more sci-fi leaning, and it's got like the right degree of sci-fi for me, for my taste. I kind of really like light sci-fi in a very contemporary setting, and while this book is about August and Jane figuring out what the heck is going on with Jane being in the subway, it's also about, at its core, their romance, and also about August's development as a person accepting her past and trying to move forward and really become her own person. I like that the book explores August and Jane's relationship in this kind of bubble that makes it seem almost magical, like very much removed from this dimension. And the fact that it's set in New York City adds this level of, the cliche romanticized New York living. I think those elements and the community that August builds after moving to her new apartment makes this book feel homey and really comforting. The next book is Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado. This is a collection of short stories about women and their relationships with themselves, their bodies, with other women, with their romantic relationships. This book also deals with a lot of tough topics within sexual assault and mental health, so I would check content warnings before going into this one. A lot of the stories lean towards this either alternative universe or kind of elements of magical fantastical in the real world. These short stories were all really layered to the point that I don't think I got the full message reading it just the first time through, especially with this one short story that was basically a summary of, or maybe like 200 episodes of Law & Order SVU, except the episodes are all these weird twisted versions of the original ones. Yeah, this collection of short stories is really memorable, really interesting, and nothing quite like anything I've read before. The next book is Tender is the Flesh by Agustina Bastarica. This is technically a dystopian book, but it's set so close to our real world, it's actually really frightening. Basically, in this world, a disease has made animal meat impossible for humans to consume. So instead, as a society, they turn to eating human flesh. And as humans do, they standardize the process a little bit too much. So what you end up seeing is we're following this manager of this meat production plant where they raise human like livestock, and you follow his life and kind of his struggles in this new world, especially like the moral struggles of basically seeing other people consume human beings. This book, from the synopsis, is pretty intense, and I'm not saying like the book isn't intense. It's really graphic and it goes deep into the meat industry, and it takes it up another level because you're seeing humans instead of animals. I like that this book explores kind of the ethical issues that the main character faces with his relationship to eating human meat and also working as a manager for a plant like this. It goes quite deep into his personal life too, you know, his relationship with his father, his kind of estranged sister, the deteriorating relationship he has with his wife. This was a pretty short book that was really well written. I would highly recommend it if you have the stomach for it. Please, content warnings for this one especially too. It really is very intense. The next book is Follow Me to Ground by Sue Rainsford. This book follows Ada and her father. They're not quite humans, and they're healers for the humans in the village that they live kind of on the outskirts of. The people in the town don't really trust them, but they know that they are good healers, so they go to them often and kind of use their non-traditional methods of treatment. Ada gets into a relationship with one of the guys from the town. It's kind of taboo, it's really frowned upon, and this relationship forces Ada to make decisions about her place as a healer, her place among the other townspeople, and also her relationship with her father. What I liked about this book was that you really have no idea what's happening when you go in. There's not a ton of context or background. You just get thrown into whatever Ada and her father are doing, and you pick up bits and pieces of their non-humanness, their methods, their ways, what makes them so magical kind of along the way of reading the book. It feels dark, but also kind of whimsical because of all the magical elements. I think it's an interesting take because Ada and her father are not traditional magical beings that we see in fiction. They are really in kind of a category of their own. There's also a heavy element of family drama in this book, so if you like that, I think you should give this book a shot. The next book is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. So in this book, our main character decides to take her own life, and she wakes up in this library that's between life and death. This library is filled with books about her life and the decisions that she makes, and she has the chance to look at all the things that have happened in her life, go back to any specific point in time, and redo a decision that she thinks of as like a mistake or something that went wrong. So this book really explores that big like what if question that we all have had, like what if I had done this differently, what would my life have looked like? There is kind of a more sci-fi twist to this book, which I was surprised about going into it, but I really liked the way that the message of our main character's journey was structured. A lot of books that try to tackle this reflective and hopeful look on life kind of are pretty heavy-handed, and while this book wasn't exactly like the queen of subtlety, I think that it was still a really powerful and emotional read, and I genuinely liked the plot and kind of the slight dry humor that was also in it too. The next book is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. This book follows Kathy, who is reflecting on her childhood growing up in this remote school in the English countryside called Hailsham. At the school, she has a lot of great memories with her and her friends, but as she grew older within the school and then graduating out of it, she realizes that there's a lot of secrets that haven't been told to the children and that they serve this kind of bigger purpose. This was a really quiet book set in pretty much current day. It feels like slightly maybe alternative universe. What I remember liking most was the author's ability to take elements and feelings of childhood and adolescence and really formulate that into these cohesive images and thoughts that I would not be able to put to word myself. So reading this book felt like a very much reflective experience of my own childhood and adolescence. I think it was a really nice, kind of quiet, reflective moment. The next book is 1Q84 by Haruki Murakami. One day, the main character Aomame walks down the set of stairs and finds herself in this alternative universe that is very much similar to the one that she left, but has these slight differences. So she calls this universe 1Q84 instead of 1984. And throughout the story, you piece together parts of Aomame's past along with other characters from the book, and you result in this kind of like epic, fantastical story of love. And I feel like that's really surprising. When I first read about this book, I didn't expect such a heavy focus on the kind of real connection between Aomame and her love interest Tengo. This book really has it all. It has the sci-fi, it has the piecing together of this mysterious past, it talks about cults, it's about history, music, culture, and art. It's basically a 900-page epic, and I would read it again any day in a heartbeat. The next book is The One by John Mars. So in this world, a company has mastered the science of finding soulmates. So you just take this test, and out of the billions of people who also take this test, they find you your closest soulmate match. We follow 5 different characters as they take the test and find their matches, but far from this being a collection of stories about love, it's about what it really means to find your soulmate, kind of the pains of it, the relationships that have to break up because people think they've found their other soulmates. And there's also a kind of thriller suspense plot tucked in there. Part of me thinks this book is really cheesy. It's written in the style where every single chapter ends off on a slight cliffhanger, and then you have to wait like a cycle of like 4 or 5 chapters before heading back to the original plotline. But I have to say it's very effective in helping you finish the book because I was really entertained throughout the entire thing. The book doesn't really reinvent the wheel when it comes to the concept of science finding your soulmate, but I think that it feels very much like it's set in our world and doesn't have that super techie, futuristic kind of vibe. And the last book is The Farm by Joanne Ramos. In this world, there are retreat centers where women get paid to basically have children for other people. They get top service there, great food, like a really beautiful, excellent facility, but they're basically trapped there until their child is born. We're following our main character Jane, who is an immigrant from the Philippines, and she also has a daughter of her own back home, and she takes part in this because she really needs the money from this program. Rather than this book having like a strict plot, I think it's mostly focused on exploring the what if this kind of farm was actually a reality and how factors like race and class affect the women there and how they're treated. The book definitely serves to add a lot of commentary to the politics of motherhood, and it was really well written. So those were the speculative fiction recommendations that I have. If you have any books that you think would go well in this category, please let me know in the comments. If you haven't already, please follow me on Instagram, Goodreads, and Storygraph. They're all linked in the description, and I would love to be friends with y'all on there as well. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please click like, and if you want to see more, click subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.